Story number 1. It's Among Us. Part 1, Clear Skies. I haven't told anyone this secret for a long time because I'm scared of what might happen. But I can't hold it in any longer. It's too much to handle now. If telling others about it means having to deal with the results, I'd rather go through them than keep living with this haunting every day. I'm writing to this group in the hopes that someone will understand what I'm going through. This can't be something that only I've had to go through. At the moment, I'm locked in my room trying to write down everything that's been bothering me for what seems like a long time. It needs to come out. If someone else has been through this, I might not feel so alone and lost. I don't think I can hold this weight any longer. I'm a dad by myself. Maria, my wife, died of cancer, and there's nothing that can really get a man ready to lose the love of his life. You can't get ready to see your child say goodbye to the woman who meant the world to you both. It seemed like the whole world had stopped for a long time. Every day seemed like it would never end. But I had to keep going because Adam is our son. I was wanted by him. Julian, California, is a small town in the middle of nowhere. It's quiet and peaceful here, away from the noise and chaos of city life. Moving us here was my choice because I thought it would give us space and time to heal. It was nice to be alone, but with a 6-year-old, it was never really quiet. The house would feel empty after I dropped Adam off at school, giving me time to think about Maria and wish she were still here. I'd think about her, our life together, and how interesting it was to remember how our son's crazy imagination brought so much life to the house. His never-ending journeys, his stories about galaxies far away, and the way his mind would wander and make up stories that were so big I could never keep up. It seemed like his inspiration came straight from Maria. He looked like me and had my eyes, but his mind and heart were all hers. He felt like she was still a part of him sometimes. We would watch a space-themed movie together every night and then go outside to look at the stars. Adam always felt more connected to the sky than anyone else. He would show me constellations, tell me school facts, and talk about the planets and how he wanted to travel there one day. After that, I'd carry him to bed, and his little hands would hold my shirt as I tucked him in. As usual, it made me feel better. But sometimes it wasn't enough to fill the void Maria left behind. Things were fine until one night when they changed. Started out like any other night. Adam and I were outside, lying on the cool pavement with our eyes on the stars. He went on and on about space and the stars, as he always did. His thoughts were flying all over the place, and I couldn't keep up. Then, though, something changed. Adam was totally quiet for a few moments. He stared at the sky with eyes that were wide and didn't blink. It was the most intense look I had ever seen in someone. His mind was off in a faraway place, lost in thought. He didn't seem to be in the present. He slowly came back to himself after I called out to him. He raised his arm and pointed up at the sky. He smiled softly, almost like he knew what was going on. "Daddy, tonight the stars are dancing." It seemed like he was talking to himself instead of me because his voice was so soft. When I looked up, I thought I might see a plane or a bright light that would help me understand what he meant. There was nothing, though. Just the same calm sky with the same stars that were all lying still. His mind was running wild, as it often did, so I thought it was time to bring him inside. His eyes were still on the window, as if he were waiting for something. He didn't seem to notice. I went outside by myself after watching some TV to relax. I needed some time to be alone. I looked up at the sky and thought about Maria. I wished she was still here with me and with us. I lost track of time because I was thinking about her and the good times we had together. After that, something took place. One of the stars, which had been completely still the whole time, suddenly shot off in a direction that didn't make sense. There wasn't a shooting star there. That much I knew. My mind tried to make sense of it, to find a reason for it. The dark sky might have made me think I saw something when I wasn't really seeing anything. But I had a strong sense that something wasn't right. That star had been still, there was no movement, but now it had moved. It made me feel uneasy deep down. Something in my gut told me that things weren't as easy as they seemed. Part 2, Dreams. Anyone who reads this needs to know that this was the real turning point for me. When a child has a big mind, it's easy for an adult to brush off the strange things that child may say. This makes me feel bad. Thinking about it now makes me realize how stupid I was to not take it more seriously and to believe it was just Adam's crazy idea. But after that night, which Adam called the night the stars danced, things began to get worse. First, everything seemed fine. Things went on as normal and the stargazing habits didn't change. It had been a while since Adam had said anything strange about the stars, so I thought it was just another instance of him letting his mind wander. I started putting Adam to bed a little earlier as the school year came to an end. The melatonin seemed to help, even though he wasn't happy about it. He'd be upset about how unfair things were 1 minute and then fall asleep quickly the next, as if the day's tiredness had hit him all at once. We didn't have as many nights together, but I still tried to spend as much time with him during the day as I could. We went on adventures, but most of the time Adam went to faraway worlds in his mind and I stayed behind. In spite of his repeated assurances that it wasn't personal, hearing him talk about his travels made me feel lonely. But life went on until one night, when everything seemed to change. As I was getting ready for bed, I heard the sound of bare feet hitting the wooden floor. I had just finished closing the blinds for the night. I turned around because I thought Adam would be just coming out of his room. But what I saw made me feel very scared. Adam was standing at the bottom of the stairs. He had cloudy eyes and a stiff body for no reason. He wasn't fully awake, at least. He walked while asleep. He did something I had never seen him do before. But there was something strange about the way he moved. It could have been his sleep plan or the melatonin. I slowly walked up to him, thinking that I would gently lead him back to bed. Before I could touch him, though, he shot his arm up and pointed straight at the door. He stood still, as if he were frozen in place and not aware of anything going on around him. I got a chill when I saw his finger pointed so firmly and without moving. It was always dark and quiet outside, so I followed his look to the glass door. But there was nothing there. There was no movement in the house, and everything looked fine. But there was a heavy, smothering feeling in the air that something wasn't right. My unease wouldn't leave me, so I walked to the door, opened it, and stepped outside. It was a cool night, and the howls of coyotes could be heard in the mountains far away, but nothing strange was going on. As I walked further into the yard, I tried to ignore the increasing fear that was filling me. Then I saw something that I couldn't look away from. A spot of dirt just past the concrete didn't look right. It was squished together, giving it a strange, purposeful shape. There seemed to be 4 pairs of shoes set up, with a little more dirt around them. It looked too clean and well-planned to have been done by an animal. Thoughts tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was an animal or maybe it was something else. Still, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that it wasn't chance. I felt uneasy, and the more I tried to push it away, the stronger it got. The house was out in the middle of nowhere, a long way from the closest neighbor. It didn't make sense for someone to be out here. The marks were too big to be from a person. The form didn't seem right to me, even though a bear could have made it. It looked like someone or something had been waiting there, looking at. In the morning, I asked Adam if he remembered walking around while he was asleep. He looked at me like he didn't understand, just like I did. "Sorry, buddy," I told him as I ruffled his hair. "Sorry to bother you, but I've never seen you do that before," I said to make things more fun. "How'd you sleep?" "Good," he said, picking up his bag and walking out the door. I had a dream I was in space and made friends with an alien. Even though my heart was racing, I kept my voice calm. "Oh really? What did you and the alien do?" "We traveled the universe, and they showed me cool things. I even got to be one in the dream. I came back to say hey and was pointing at you from outside." "Daddy?" My heart stopped beating. I tried to hide how shocked I was, but everything inside me stopped moving. How did he know about the pointing? I didn't tell him about it. I hadn't told you about the strange sleepwalking or how he'd been staring at the door with that strange, unblinking look. How could he have known? I had a lot on my mind as I drove him to school that morning. I was scared to be in the house by myself, but I knew I couldn't let that stop me. I told myself it was probably just one of his crazy stories, his way of impressing me or playing a joke on me. He was only 6 years old. Still, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that there was more going on than what I could explain. But the fact that Adam knew was what scared me the most. He knew, and that scared me. Part 3, Walking While Sleeping. That night Adam sleepwalked, but I didn't want to tell him because I didn't want to scare him. He would have likely thought it was cool, but I didn't want him to think I was scared or worried. Things went on with my life, and the fear turned into the thought that it was all a strange accident. I gave Adam melatonin every night before bed in the hopes that it was the cause. Before he went to sleep that night, I checked on him. With a sigh of relief, I shut the door behind him as he snored in his bed. I thought what happened the night before was just a one-time thing. After that, when I went to bed, my body and mind started to calm down. That's when I heard it. A light tapping sound. I sat up and opened my eyes because I thought Adam was at my door. I sighed as I got out of bed and walked over to open it. I was shocked that Adam wasn't there. It took me a moment to figure out what was going on before the tapping started again. This time, I noticed that it sounded like it was echoing through the house. It was soft, but the sound was steady. Tap, 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 tap. The noise was clear and almost seemed to be synchronized. I went into Adam's room, opened the door, and looked around the dark space. Still wrapped in his blanket, he was soundly sleeping. I looked in the other upstairs rooms, but there was nothing strange there. It was almost like the hitting was set to repeat after a short break. Since both of our rooms were on the second floor and there were no trees close, I didn't think a branch could have been tapping on the window. As I went downstairs, the sound got a little louder. It must have been a bird or an animal outside. The wind could have been pushing a bush against the window. We always left some lights on, so as I walked through the dark house, my eyes quickly got used to it. The sound stopped again when I got to the kitchen. I turned on the light, but there was nothing strange about what I saw in the room. I looked in the fridge, the sink, and the rest of the kitchen. Nothing. As I stood by the bar, I looked at the walls and how the shadows moved on them. Sometimes the flickering light outside makes the shadows move in strange ways. But then I saw something. One shade, which looked like a long hand, slowly started to rise and stretch upward. I couldn't move because I was so scared. My breath got stuck in my throat. As the hand got bigger, it looked like it was getting closer to the window. Just as it got to its biggest size, I heard the tapping sound again. Tap, 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 tap. When I looked out the window, my heart was beating fast. I didn't see anything. I ran over to it and looked out into the dark night. All I could see was dust moving in the wind. I was trying to figure out what was going on when I saw something in the dirt in front of the house. This is the same squished patch from before. The form was the same, and it was about the size of 4 shoes stacked in 2 pairs. The questions came back to me like a wave, but I had to stop them when I heard something behind me. I quickly turned around, grabbed the knife that was close by, and faced the sound. I was shocked to see Adam sleepwalking again. I put down the knife, angry and confused. I couldn't believe it when he moved toward where I had just been standing as I picked him up. He got up on the counter and stood with his back to the window. The tapping began once more. Tap, 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 tap. I quickly went over and picked him up off the counter. As my anger built, I yelled, "Adam, what the hell are you doing? Do you think this is funny?" But Adam did nothing but look around. "What are you talking about, Dad? Why did you bring me in?" he asked. "I lost it." "Quit that nonsense. I don't understand why you carry on this, but enough is enough." He shook his head and tears came into his eyes as soon as I yelled. It hit me when he started to cry. I went too far. If I looked down at his arm, I saw a dark red mark from when I held him too tight. I felt guilty. I didn't mean to hurt him, but I did because I was scared. It took a while for his tears to stop after I hugged him and told him I was sorry. He was crying when I took him back to my room. I checked his arm to make sure it was okay. I almost screamed at him for something that wasn't his fault. I asked him about the sleepwalking in the morning, but he didn't remember anything. I didn't talk about the shadow or the tapping. I didn't want to make him mad. There was nothing I could think about but what had happened. We watched movies all day to make up for it. I knew I wouldn't sleep that night. I couldn't get rid of the picture of the hand on the wall. It made me think that someone had been out there playing a dark game. Any way I could make sure Adam was safe, I thought about putting in cameras or motion monitors. I was determined to find out what was going on, But as I fell asleep on the couch that night, the pictures played in the background. Even though I didn't know what it was, I was going to make sure Adam was safe. Before I fell asleep, the last thing I saw in my mind was E.T. reaching out and touching the boy's finger with his glowing finger. I had no idea that picture would always stay with me. Voices in Part 4. When I was done setting up the cameras and motion monitors around the house, I made sure my phone was ready to go. Whatever the hell had chosen to come to my house, I was going to catch them. Adam's life was already changed by Maria's death, so I didn't want anything else to change it. The only thing I could do was hope that whoever had been there hadn't seen me set up the devices during the day. After a day with Adam, the house started to take on an orange tint from the setting sun, and long shadows ran along the walls. Because I felt bad about hurting Adam's arm the night before, I let him sleep with me that night. I thought it would help him forgive me and keep him from being alone. If he did sleepwalk again, I thought at least I'd be able to see everything and maybe figure out what was wrong. Took him longer to fall asleep, but I didn't give him the medicine. It seemed to be a pattern in the way he had been acting lately. After rolling around and tossing for about 30 minutes, he finally fell asleep. I kept staring at the phone screen. I knew that the sounds had begun around 2 a.m. the night before, so I made sure to stay up until 3 a.m. I didn't sleep deeply, so if I did fall asleep, the alarm on my phone would wake me up right away. During the wait, I read the book I had been meaning to finish for what seemed like a long time. I checked the time after what seemed like a very long time of pages. It was 2:30 in the morning. Still nothing. Since he fell asleep, Adam hadn't moved at all and my phone didn't ring. The person or thing might have seen me set everything up and chose to leave. It's also possible that they were just waiting for the right time. I waited for another half hour. It was still quiet. It looked like any other night. When I laid down on the pillow, I put my phone next to me in case I got any alerts. Before I knew it, I was out. It was dark outside, and I was asleep. I wasn't sure how long I had been asleep, but when I woke up all of a sudden, it felt like only minutes. My eyes opened wide. It was 4 a.m. on the clock. When I looked down, the blanket was gone. I flipped over to face Adam and let out a gasp. He was on the bed with his eyes closed and his back to the door. He stood up straight like someone had put him there. He stood with his arms straight out to his sides and his body stiff, like a soldier standing at attention. I stopped moving and stared at him for a moment. I checked the door and saw that it was still shut. I stood there and watched in shocked silence. Several minutes went by, and he didn't move. He finally got up from the bed. I got up slowly so as not to wake him up. Adam tripped and fell, moving clumsily like he was just starting to walk. I quietly went after him as he walked toward the door. He stood there at the door for a while. I meant to wake him up but couldn't. I had to watch him do something else. Before I could make out weak whispers, the room was dead quiet for what seemed like 10 minutes. I crept up on him and tried hard to understand what he was saying, but the words were hard to make out. It was hard to keep up with how fast his lips moved. I stopped moving when I was only a foot away from him. He stared at the door in front of him with wide open eyes that never shut. It looked like he was talking to someone on the other end because his mouth was moving faster and faster. I then heard it. One more sound. The same as his, but a little louder. It hurt my heart to feel that. Came through the door from the other side. The voice was still too quiet, even though I pressed my ear against the door. There was no warning on my phone, and the house wasn't moving. Still, there was someone or something on the other side. My thoughts were going fast. The chimney was the only other way to get into the house. Someone would have been caught on camera if they tried to get up there without a ladder. I couldn't get rid of the horrible thought that someone was talking to my son. I slowly got down on the floor to look under the door and try to catch a glimpse of the people who were breaking in. Through the crack, I could just barely see anything. Two things were in the way of the light. Even though they were too big to be people, they looked like the shapes of footprints in the dirt from the night before. It was quiet before I could figure out what I was seeing. The room stopped making any noise at all. Adam put his hand on the door and lightly tapped it with his fingers. The sound was the same as the night before, but it was quieter this time. When I heard a second tap in the hallway, I stood there in shock. It almost sounded like shaking in my ear. It had to have come from the floor, because that was where I was lying. I was afraid to look. Something or someone on the other side had seen me, so I knew I was being watched. Slowly, I turned my attention back to the floor. There was an eye looking at me from in the crack. A dark, deep eye. Its pupil wasn't round. Instead, it was a strange triangle shape that I had never seen before. I was frozen with fear. My eyes met and I couldn't take my eyes off of it. Then there was another tap on the other side, which made the floor shake. Tap, 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 tap. The eye was gone in an instant, and heavy, fat footsteps could be heard down the hall. I jumped up, grabbed Adam, and pushed him out of harm's way. I then slammed the door open and ran after whatever it was. As I went down the stairs, I saw the holes in the walls where it had gotten out. When I got to the stove, the ash was already falling apart, which meant it was time for it to go. I felt panic in my chest. When I ran back into the room, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. Adam stood at the doorway, shaking from a force that didn't seem normal. I could see the skin pulling and torn as his hands gripped the edges of his lips so hard that I couldn't open his mouth. His fingers dug deep, and his nails were almost touching his own skin as he tried to get something out. I had no idea what it was, because he had his eyes rolled back. All that could be seen was the bright white of his sclera and the veins that ran across them like mad rivers. The sound that came out of him was horrible. A high-pitched scream from the pits of hell that was so raw and scary that it shook the house to its core. In a scared moment, I ran up to him and grabbed his arms with all my strength to stop the horrible pain he was causing himself. But he wouldn't stop. His screams turned into desperate sobs, and he kept pulling at his mouth as if he were trying to get away from something invisible. His body jerked in pain, but I held him tight because I was so scared of the harm he was doing. His eyes closed quickly, and he fell asleep in my arms. The room felt like it was falling apart around me. Suddenly, a weird sound came from above. Something horrible. There was a scary sound coming from the roof, like something was pulling and scraping across the tiles. The roof creaking under the weight of whatever was moving on it. It didn't stop. Then there was the clear sound of tiles breaking on the ground below. The loud clang of things hitting the ground wouldn't stop. It looked like the thing, whatever it was still moving, as if it were tearing through the house from above. There were shocks in the walls that made me feel like the house was shaking. The noise of heavy, fat limbs slamming against the roof got louder and faster. Then, out of the blue, the sound changed to Adam's horrifying screech resonating above. But this time it was the creature's voice that sent chills down my spine. I knew what I needed to do. I couldn't let go of Adam because I had to keep him safe. I couldn't take my eyes off of Adam, even though my phone started to ring with alarms from the motion monitors and cameras. That thing was still here, so I couldn't risk letting go of him. All through the house, the motion detectors went off, but as quickly as they did, there was quiet. The camera alerts stopped, as did the noise from the roof and the creature's chaos. It looked like the house had stopped moving at all. I was frozen and didn't know what to do as Adam breathed shallowly in my arms. My phone's alarms had stopped going off, and the strange silence hit me like a heavy weight. Adam slowly opened his eyes, and his face showed that he was confused, as if nothing had happened. He looked at me, and his face changed from a smile to worry. I could no longer hold back my tears. As I fell on top of him and started shaking violently, all of my fear, confusion, and terror came out. Part 5. Adam. It was hard to describe what had happened. Adam didn't understand why his mouth hurt. The walls had strange holes in them, or I was crying. I just couldn't tell him the truth. How could I tell a child about something so scary? And he knew that something was almost going to hurt him. How could he ever feel safe again? It was sleepwalking, I told him, even though I knew it was something much worse. He had rubbed his mouth raw. I told them I fell down the stairs because of the marks on the walls. The lies would not have worked if he were older, but I needed him to believe me and stay cool. I wish I could run away as fast as I could, but I wasn't sure if the thing would follow us. Really, I didn't want to put anyone else in danger. To keep Adam safe, I had to figure out what this thing was and what it wanted with him. Moving picture and motion detectors I had set up were all broken and lying on the ground when I woke up the next morning. I looked at the video, but all I saw was a blur right before the lens broke. It didn't want to be seen by anyone. The sounds from that night, Adam's screams and that thing's voice, stuck in my head. It wouldn't go away. That same day, I bought new cameras and motion devices, some for the roof. The chimney was broken, and the next morning I found pieces of it. I spent the whole morning setting up the new gear to make sure everything was safe. As night fell, I did everything I could to stay safe. I pushed furniture up against doors and told Adam it was because of a bad storm. He didn't say anything about it and stuck with his movie. It wasn't safe for me to let this thing get any closer. It seemed like every second went by so slowly. Adam was watching his movie and didn't notice that his fear was getting closer. It made me feel bad that his little world was falling apart while mine was falling apart. Adam passed out on the couch next to me after the movie was over. I kissed him on the cheek and turned off the TV in order to wait. It was 2 a.m. on the clock. I knew it was out there. My eyes were on the cams when I got up. Nothing. The quiet was heavy on me. The only sound was crickets outside, but they didn't make me feel better. They just reminded me that I was by myself. Then there were no more crickets. I felt a chill that you can't brush off. It felt close to me in my gut. My phone went off. I looked at the message. There was movement on the front porch. When I opened the camera feed, my heart was beating fast. Somewhere in the distance, a person stood in the dark. It was tall and thin, and its limbs were twisted in strange ways. It seemed to want me to see it because it knew I was looking. The figure twisted and bent before making its way back into the darkness. I was feeling sick. The phone buzzed again just as I sat down to check on Adam, who was still asleep on the couch. This time, I heard the crash from the front steps. The light flashed and then went out. When there was another, bigger crash, I knew the camera was broken. A rock had been thrown at it. I wasn't going to fall for it. I had to stay with Adam. After some time, I finally heard it whispering. It was too weak to hear at first, but it got louder quickly. That was just the right amount of low for me to hear the voice. Then I felt it. Something moved next to me. Adam was awake. It was him who heard the whispers. I was sure it would do something bad if it got close enough. Everything is going to be okay. I won't let you get hurt. I love you. I whispered to Adam into my tight grip. The whispering stopped, and there was quiet. But then I heard it in the dark outside. My voice, strange and evil. Adam, I won't let you get hurt. A cold chill went through me. The voice was rough and sounded like it had been abused, but it sounded a lot like mine. I did my best to stay calm. I have no idea who you are, but you can't have my son. Leave this place. It was very quiet, and then there was a loud slam on the door. The house shook. It began to knock again, first softly and then with more force. Every knock got stronger and more desperate until the door shook wildly. Adam started to cry. Ada-am. When I ran to the door, I pushed the chair against it, but from the other side, the eyes, two bright points, stared back at me. I couldn't see the face, but I could feel how angry they were. I ran back to Adam and tried to comfort him by holding him as tight as I could, but the noise outside was too loud. Felt like the house was breaking apart. The world seemed to be falling apart around us as we screamed. Then all of a sudden there was silence. I took my ears off, confused. There was no sound, just our breath. I opened the curtain to see what was going on. The porch was empty, and the camera was broken. I let out a happy sigh and grabbed Adam in my arms. It was over. As I smiled and kissed him on the forehead, I pulled away and held his head in my hands. I thought I was looking at my wife again when I saw the smile on his face. After giving him a hug, I checked the house to make sure nothing was there. As soon as I was sure it was just the two of us, I left my room and started walking down the stairs. I stopped and looked at the marks the monster had made. It made me think of everything we had been through, and I began to cry. As I got ready to go back downstairs, I felt something buzz in my pocket. The stairs rang with a familiar alert. I looked up at my screen and saw the alert, which made my whole body feel weak. There was movement on the roof. The next second, I heard loud screaming coming from the top of the chimney as tiles were ripped off and metal was being torn apart. With tears still in my eyes, I ran down the stairs right away. Adam was holding the TV remote when I ran into the living room from around the corner. He looked at me with such happiness that it made my tears fall out faster and faster. His smile lit up the room. Now I knew that it had been waiting for the right time, just when Adam was close enough to reach. It was important for me to be faster than it. I sped toward him with all my might and began screaming for him to come to me. He had a confused look on his face, and I could see rocks and ash falling from the chimney behind him. "Daddy, I wanted to know if you were interested in watching." I saw a long, skinny arm come out of the chimney and wrap around Adam just as my fingertip was touching his hand. I watched as Adam's fear hit him hard and he started to scream, right before the arm slammed him into the wall and hit his head on the hard chimney entrance. After that, both the arm and Adam went down the chimney ahead. It was all motion, and I fell to the ground in front of the chimney. Blood was all over the floor and on my hands. I screamed in pain because all I could hear from the hole in front of me was Adam's screams, which were getting farther away as the thing carried him away. This was something I had to write about so that people could read it. I hope I never see this thing again. I think about Adam and Maria all the time and what I could have done better. Every second of every day I beat myself up for not being able to keep them safe from the risks in and out of this world. I wish someone could understand what I've been through, but I know that's not going to happen. Don't feel sad for me if you read this. I deserve it. I think about Adam and where he might be every night when I look at the stars. I wish Maria and him would look back at me sometimes, but I'm not sure if that's true. It tricked me and got what it wanted from me. I want the world to know that this story is a message and a warning. It's not just us and this thing. It moves around with us. Story number 2. I used to live in a scary house. In East Germany, my mom and dad bought a house in the middle of nowhere when she was pregnant with me. My mom worked at a mental hospital an hour away, and my dad couldn't work because he was disabled. My dad was always left home by himself, which he didn't like. He told my mom that he heard voices and footsteps, saw things move, the TV changed channels, and other things. "No, you're just stressed and tired," was always what my mom told herself, and it's still what she tells herself today. She thought it was because of his medications for his heart defect, diabetes, and very strong painkillers. When I was born, my dad was too scared to let me sleep in the attic, which was supposed to be my room. I had to stay in his room until he could no longer give me reasons not to. He always said I'd have bad dreams and other problems, and since my mom worked nights, I couldn't show him he was wrong. He also sent me to school when I was 9 months old because the house scared him too much. The first things I remember about this house are the same. Sounds I heard were men's words, coughing, and heavy steps. My father, on the other hand, had a lot of trouble with it. For some reason, I didn't think they were scary. My mother used to work a lot of night shifts, but not anymore, so I was moved to the room in the attic. There was a lot more noise. I went through the same things my dad did. It happened to my TV, VHS player, and DVD player all the time. I didn't think it was strange because I was used to it and thought that was how they worked. Every night, the drapes in front of my bed would move to the spot next to the sofa that my mom put there. One of the plush toys kept falling off the shelf. I also had strange dreams about grown guys who were jerks, a Russian soldier, and 2 other guys I could not put into a single group. I wouldn't see the men in my dreams as dangerous. They would just be, that's it. Because I was so young, I didn't know that this village was really for the Russian troops in the GDR. When the GDR ended, the Russian soldiers left, and Germans bought those homes. They told me their names were Sasha, Heinrich, and Max, so that's what I called them. The woods are dangerous, and Sasha and Max always told me not to go there by myself. I didn't ask about it because there was no reason to. People in my neighborhood always watched me when my dad was in the hospital and my mom was at work when school was out. I was 4. Also, the 3 of them would always tell me not to talk to certain neighbors, which meant almost all of them except the ones who watched me often. Again, why would I doubt that? For years old, having nice neighbors was fine, and those 3 were always nice. My mother once said that I went through the same thing that my dad did. So she asked my dad and me different questions. They were named, and I told her what they said and how they talked. I told them, I know a shortcut, when we were both on our way to the beach. We had a secret beach that you can't even see on Google Maps because it's part of the military base next to our house. No one really knew. Not her, not my dad, not the neighbors, and not even her. But I found a way to get her there through the bush. I knew where to step and where not to step. What in the world could be in a forest next to a Russian military base in a war-torn area? Right on. Mines on land. I never hit one and saw one go off until I was 12. We did find a lot of people who stepped on those mines, though. Sasha told me, I told my mom when she asked where I learned it. At that point, she did become suspicious and look into it. The first cop who lived there and died had a heart attack. People named Max and Heinrich moved there and then died. Also, Heinrich was very old. Max's mom had to do more work because she bought the house from the bank. The person who lived here before us killed himself. Max. For years, I saw and heard them. Then, it got quieter until I moved into my dad's room after he died. But I always felt like someone was watching me in that room, from where his bed was in the corner. Maybe I'm just paranoid. I'm 9 years old now and can think straight. There's nothing there. What about those steps? These aren't the steps he took when his feet hurt. No. This is the house settling down. After all, it's a wooden house. Sounds at 2 a.m.? Playing with your mind. Do things move? It has to be my ADHD. I often forget how old I am and look for the remote that I have in my hand. Another few years go by and I have a friend over. We chose to stay in the upstairs and watch Harry Potter on my old TV from the 1980s, which had a DVD player. The TV turns off. It must be the wires. The light comes on. The switch might not have been fully flipped. The TV turns on again. But Nupagati is now playing on my VHS. That thing scared me when I was a kid, so it's not new. That's what I did while my friend got quiet and called my name while looking at the door with their eyes. I put a cover over the mirror on the chimney. When I was a kid, I painted on mirrors because they scare me. What? I swear there's someone standing there. You see things? No, I don't. That's a Russian. Very funny, German. I thought she was joking because she always called me Russian. My mind went to the fact that I was the only Russian kid in my grade school. Look, he's staring right at us. It scared me, so I turned around and don't see anything. You see someone? Yeah. How do you know he's Russian? 'Cause of the uniform. You see him. Uniform? What the hell would she think of my made-up friends? At least I thought they were just made-up friends. As a joke, Sasha. Leave. A horrible joke. Then she looked at me, grabbed her things, and ran back down the stairs. Then she told me the Russian did nothing but nod and walk away. She swore she would never go back to my attic and slept in a tent in the backyard that night. What the hell did she mean when she said she saw my childhood fantasy friend? My mom asked her about it at some point, and after a very long time of talking, she told her what she saw. After we dropped off my friend at her house the next day, my mom parked her car and told me that those people were real. She thought they were, but when she saw my dad looking at her in the hallway, she changed her mind. Many years after he died, she told me she yelled at him to leave, and he did. He went back to his room where he died, and then it became my room. Let's just say that when I get that house, it goes straight back to the bank. I still don't know what the hell is going on with it. Because what do those guys in the attic want if it was really ghosts? Why are they there? Why did they look at my friend? I couldn't see Sasha, but she could. But why did he just nod and leave her alone if he was bad? I feel watched every time I go up to the attic. I feel like someone is watching me every time I'm in my room. Those footsteps and words in the attic are still there for me to hear. He might have been stumping to get the blood going when he heard those footsteps in my dad's room. I don't care, though. I don't want to see him. I think I'd feel the same way my mom did when she saw him. I'm not going to keep this house, though. This house has always had a problem. Costs a lot to keep up, and I don't want to see ghosts. Story number 3. A knock in the weeds. We had just moved to a new house in our city of Altoona, Pennsylvania, where I was a single mother in my mid-40s. My son was 4 years old at the time. Someone knocked on our door late one night. We had only lived there for a few weeks. I was still up unpacking and putting things away while my son fell asleep on the couch. It was cold outside, and when I opened the curtain, I saw a small young woman standing on our porch. I asked her what she wanted as I opened the door as far as the chain latch would let me. She asked if she could come in and use the phone because she had locked herself out of her house. When I asked her where she lived, she gave me an address for a house close by, about a block away. There was something wrong with her story. I saw that at least 6 houses had their door lights on, so she must have gone by those. Across the street, there was also a payphone that was still working. Still, danger bells were going off because I didn't have any change to give her. I didn't want to let her in because my son was sleeping in the living room, but it was cold outside, so I gave her my coat and cell phone through the opening. She took my coat and phone and called someone, but I couldn't hear her because she walked to the other end of the porch. I told her to put the phone in the mailbox when she was done and to bring my coat back tomorrow, and then I shut the door. She left the phone, but she never came back for my coat. I got weird calls at all hours for a few weeks. When I replied, people wanted to know who I was or just hung up. 2 or 3 months later, there was a picture of the young woman who had come to our door that night on the front page of Altona's daily newspaper. In a big drug bust, she and 10 other accused were caught. When I thought about that cold winter night and how she showed up in a sleeveless shirt after walking by a few homes in the area, I got chills. What might have happened to me and my young son if I hadn't paid attention to my worries and fears, even though she looked like she couldn't do anything? Story number 4. What was it? One of my best friends and I used to be very close, but then we stopped hanging out. I'm going to call her Emma, which is a made-up name to protect her privacy. Emma and I used to hang out a lot when we weren't in our buddy group. Her mom would bring her to my house, pick her up, and do other things. Since it got dark when we hung out, I always told my parents where I was going and what I was doing to be safe. I also sent them a message every so often to make sure they knew I was okay. Emma came over one night, and we planned to go to a nearby woods to play. The woods had a cool park with a big slide and a high-up wood climbing structure right next to the entrance. We were just going to hang out for a while. We went into the woods at night for the first time. We turned on our phone flashlights and listened to music on my phone while we played on the high-up slide and the bridges that ran along the whole play area. It was getting dark, so I offered we go back to mine or somewhere else because I'm scared of the dark and something didn't feel right. As I climbed down the ladder to the ground, I heard what sounded like raindrops hitting the trees. It didn't rain, though. My friend must have heard it too, because I told her about it after we left, and she thought it was weird. We planned to go walking in the woods at night as a joke and maybe fuck around with dog walkers or other people in the woods as a joke. Emma came over again. We got in and went to the side of the road that wasn't near the park. The park was way across the woods and a long way away. There was a big path on the other side of the trees that we walked down with a real flashlight. We messed around and talked about school and problems in my friend group at the time. We took a different road about 15 to 20 minutes further down the path and came to a clearing surrounded by trees. I saw 2 bright things as I shined the light into the tree line. Maybe some dots. It didn't bother me because I thought it was just 2 dogs with their owners who had gone further up the road than their owner. We went across the forest to the other side in about 15 minutes, which is pretty fast considering how far we were from the main exit on the park side of the forest. We often sat on this bench next to the field, which was ringed by trees. Emma and I got it together. She sat down and I flashed the flashlight around us. Until I stopped. I saw a small black figure from behind a tree. It looked like it was looking us and Emma from behind the tree. I told Emma in a whisper, "We need to get across this field now." When she got up, I looked at her and jogged across the field into the trees, following suit. I told her what I saw, and she started to freak out a bit, so I suggested we leave right away and go to mine. I had been here many times before, so I knew that the road we were on would lead us to an exit. I kept the light on behind and all around us as we walked to make sure we were alone. I really wish I hadn't. After shining the light behind us about 5 times, I stopped. She stopped and called my name, but I just looked at what I saw. 2 sets of bright eyes flashed again, but this time I couldn't see a body. It wasn't an animal. It was just a black thing with eyes. Even when I zoomed in on the eyes with the torch, only the eyes were really lit up. Now, for those who might say, "Oh, it's just a dog," fox, or other animal. I live in Britain, where foxes usually run away from people or even sounds. There were no other people around, so it couldn't have been a dog. I called out several times to be sure. "Hello? Anyone there? Is this your dog?" And a lot of other things that anyone would have answered. But there was quiet. Emma started to run away in fear, but I couldn't look away. Soon I did, and we ran back across the field and out of the woods quickly. As we left and started walking back to my house, I looked at her and realized what I had done. The glowing things we saw earlier were still following us all the way to the other side of the bush. I haven't been to the woods in a long time, and the thought of going scares me. Please let me know what it could be if you know. Story number 5. I may have been afraid of something when I thought I was just being anxious. I wrote this so I could talk to someone about it because it keeps me up at night. To give you some history, my parents split up when I was about 10 years old, and my mom ended up having custody of me. For me and her, my mom has always had horses, and she saw this as a chance to try running our own stable since my dad wasn't really interested in that. The nice ranch she found was about 10 kilometers from the nearest town or other people of society, and even farther from any real towns and stuff. As someone who has never really liked being outside, I was excited about the new place and the chance to be close to my favorite animals. But I didn't like that we were in the middle of forests and felt a little alone. This was especially true since I was in my early teens at the time we lived there and had to worry about getting a ride to the city. Just so you know, I used to live in southern Finland. There isn't much to fear in the forest there, but I've always been creative enough to make up for it. Being outside by myself was something I was always afraid of during the 5 years or so I lived there. Being around the horses or riding them in the forest didn't bother me, but I often felt very uneasy when I had to walk around by myself. It was always easy for me to write this off as my weak mind, and most of it was. After dark, I would run from place to place with my heart in my mouth. It was fine during the day. There wasn't a specific thing they were afraid of, like the dark. It was just a feeling of deep fear. Sometimes it was the worst waiting for the school bus in the morning. It's dark out here most of the year, so I would have to stand alone at the edge of our land in the winter and pray that no one was there. The fact that the house wasn't even safe for me didn't help. It was big, and my mom and I lived there most of the time. But she was gone a lot for work and to take care of the animals, so I spent a lot of time by myself. I tried to avoid going to some parts of the house, and the whole place had a strange vibe. Although I don't know much about the house's past, I think the previous owners abused their dogs. There were teeth and claw marks on most doorways that were dog height, and it was said that they locked the dogs in single rooms when they had to go on business trips. Otherwise, the house was very big, even though it only had one story and one room that felt like it had a lot of space. There was a long hallway that ran through the building, and I swear that going to the bathroom at night gave me the creeps because I had to walk through it. All of this could, of course, be because I'm a scaredy cat. But I also felt like someone or something was watching me all the time. I ended up moving because the windows in my old room were on the ground level and the windows in my new room were so high that anything shorter than a person couldn't reach them. At one point, I felt a little braver and started walking along the nearby roads to prove to myself that there wasn't anything there. But then I almost got hit by a deer, which was probably just as surprised as I was. And then I ran all the way home because my instincts told me to. I'm not going to make up a big story like everything was silent, but my instincts told me to run and not look back. And I'm not the type to fight that kind of instinct. Right after I moved out when I was 16, even though I liked living near horses, it was a relief to be able to walk around my house without being afraid of what I might see. That's when my mom started telling me things she hadn't told me when I was still living with her because she knew I'd freak out. That's right. She told me that wolves had been seen in our area in the past few months. This doesn't explain all of my paranoia, but it does explain the most recent one, and she said that the wolves had killed deer right near our house, with the closest one being across the road in the field next to our house. I hadn't seen it since I left, but I had seen some other dead bodies in the area and thought they were a little strange. But that wasn't the worst part. My mom told me a story that made me really glad I had moved away. She said that one morning, she had gone out to feed the horses as normal, 4 to 5 a.m., before she had to go to work. But as soon as she got outside, she noticed something wasn't right. We had motion sensor lights on the corner of the stable, which meant that you had to walk out into the dark in the morning to make them work. My mom was walking outside with our cats. Usually, they don't mind going ahead, but that morning they didn't want to go past the door light at all. But my mom isn't afraid, and she just walked into the dark. Mom saw a wolf in the dark by the stable corner when the stable light went out. The wolf ran off when the light came back on, but Mom saw it for a moment. The animal was probably just looking around to see if there was any easy food nearby. Wolves aren't stupid enough to try to eat horses, and she wasn't even sure if it was a wolf or something else. I was pretty upset by this news, though. I hope the wolves only showed up in the area after I got my moped license and quit taking the school bus. So, to sum up, I lived in a house and neighborhood that scared me for a few years. I haven't told all of my scary stories in this already too long post, but if anyone has any questions or similar stories, please leave them in the comments. I think the house had bad vibes because of the people who lived there before, and the forest had bad vibes because of the animals that lived there. But the truth is that I might just be easily scared by even the smallest scary things. Story number 6. The Face of the Devil. I saw the devil's face last night. My girlfriend and I were driving back from 2 states away to attend the funeral of my grandfather. We had never driven that way before, but the GPS said it would take 9 hours. It was an hour faster than the route we took to get there. It was a smooth 3-hour ride on the first leg, with no signs of what was to come. I had a smooth drive thanks to the roads and cruise control, but Maya had to go to the bathroom and I could too. My phone helped me find the closest gas station. It only took 10 minutes longer to drive there. It wasn't quite dark yet, but the sky was red. I felt bad about my decisions just a mile from the exit. From smooth asphalt, the road turned into a mess of potholes and poor efforts to fix them. By the way Maya looked at me, I knew we had to stop right away. There were no buildings, and the signs were rusty and had been shot to hell with .22 caliber and buckshot. Before I got to the gas station, all I could see were pine trees and dead deer. I was relieved that it looked more modern and clean than I had thought. It wasn't nice by any means, but I wasn't afraid of getting sick in the bathroom. I started to pump gas because it made sense to do so while we were here. Maya ran into the small store. I watched her until she went behind a shelf of chips. We didn't need too much, so the pump was very slow. It should be enough to get us home after I got back. It looked like she was taking too long. It was 5:45 p.m. when I looked at my phone. The sun was going down. Even worse, my cell phone wouldn't work. I was still more mad than worried at this point. I went inside after her and left the pump going. It looked like any other dirty gas station. But there was no one there. There was no host, teller, cleaner, or anyone else. It was loud enough inside for everyone to hear me call out for Maya. Not an answer. Scare was quickly taking the place of anger. I ran to the bathroom for women and opened the door wide. It wasn't Maya. It was just a bathroom that hadn't been cleaned in months. When I yelled, "Maya," there was no answer. When I looked out the window, the car was still there, but Maya wasn't there. This time, I ran to the men's room and hit the door hard. It doesn't move. It hurts still in my shoulder. I bang on the door with the arm that wasn't hurting so badly. "Maya, are you there?" I hear a flush. Is she not hearing? The door lock went off. When a big man walks out, a smell comes out with him. He was just fixing his belt. He was easily 6 feet 5 inches tall, and his black hair was pulling out at the temples. He also had a scar over a big part of his cheek. He pushed me aside and walked toward the door, saying, "Shut up, kid. This is a public place." As soon as I saw that face, I knew I would never forget it. I hit the bathroom door with my foot. My eyes got blurry, and the sound stopped. I threw up. It didn't make sense to check vital signs. I feel so small, but I stopped thinking. I ran out of the store and looked around, but there was nothing there. No cars. No huge monsters. It was just dusk and crickets. I had to go back to the highway for 5 minutes to get a signal. When the cops questioned me, I told them everything you heard. They didn't believe me, but they didn't arrest me either. At least not yet. Today I bought a gun, and now I'm going back to find someone with that scar. It wasn't the devil's face, but his was ugly. That's what I saw in that room. Story number 7. about the ghost attack we had a few days ago. Even though it's only been a few days, the story I'm about to tell you still makes it hard for me to sleep. I'm typing this after only 4 to 5 hours of sleep because of what happened to my friends and me. My friends and I were really bored last Saturday. Then I heard about this empty apartment complex about 25 minutes away, in the middle of nowhere. My friends Jaden and Carter and I decided to check out that empty apartment building because we were so bored. Before we even got there, I could see a broken window and a sign that said, "Do not enter," but, being the stupid 18-year-olds that we are, we chose to sneak in through the broken window one at a time. Not even 5 minutes in, we heard a light tapping or thud coming from an upstairs room. Jaden, who was high on weed, became suspicious right away, but we reassured him it was nothing since he was the only one who had done that kind of thing. Most of the rooms were just old furniture and some had graffiti or spray paint on the walls. The only places we hadn't checked out were the attic and the room with the tapping. When we went into the room with the tapping, a door suddenly slammed open, but no one was there. When I thought about this, my blood ran cold. It didn't take us long to get out of that building. When we made the bad choice to stay outside the building, a live rock and a bullet were thrown at us. One hit my leg, and the rock hit Jaden and Carter in the chest. We got in my Challenger and I sped down the road. I was going at least 80 miles per hour, but I don't care anymore. We got home in less than 20 minutes and all took showers. When Carter got out of the shower, he said his back hurt, and I saw blood and streaks on his back that made me want to throw up. I looked at my back and saw a big mark on the left side of my gut. Jaden had a little blood on him from the bullet, but he was okay. We're still getting better, and I'll never go back to that fucking building. I think a dark spirit that didn't belong there attacked us. Ever since I was a child, I've never believed in ghosts or other supernatural things.